Again, good afternoon, everybody. I want to introduce Patrick and Robin Taylor of Viking Aircraft. They're going to do this next forum this afternoon. Here again, they're going to bring you up to date on everything, what they're doing, some new gear leg configurations, and then we're going to get back into where we left off this afternoon with the builders. Again, I'd like to welcome them to Ottawa. This is the first time they've been back in front of the group. Again, I'd like you to all put your hands together and let's welcome them.
Well, I think the first thing I'll do is kind of introduce myself. I've known a lot of you guys for, it seems like years, haven't seen you in years, and see a lot of new faces. So kind of a little bit about myself. I learned to fly basically in a home built, but going back a little bit beyond that, I was in the service, electronics training, got out of the service, went through A&P school, got my aircraft maintenance ticket. Then my dad was delivering an engine one time in Northern California just after he started Happy Engines. And I said, well, to my new bride, if we're going to take a flyer, now is a good time to do it. So a few months after we got married, we moved from Northern California to Southern California and went into business with my parents. And we all lived together for about a year or so, and so for newlyweds, that's kind of hard. We manage, and we've been together now 16 years. So we manufactured Happy Engines since 1978. When the Dragonfly came along, we were just across the mountain from Bob Walters. He had an engine problem. He had originally a stock 1600 in the airplane. So when he wanted to upgrade and put the starter on it and such like that, we were so close together that we got together. We put an engine on a Happy 60 horse 1835 on the prototype. And Rex mentioned to Bob at that point in time, if you ever want to sell the design, give us first shot at it. So I think it was 82 or 83, 81, a long time ago. Bob wanted to get out, so he offered it to us, and Rex and I got the Dragonfly, and we were doing Dragonfly along with Happy Engines for a number of years. Anybody who was out at Eloy, Arizona, saw the size of the plant, and basically we overgrew for the upcoming recession, and we weren't able really to compensate for it. So let's see, we moved back to North Carolina from Arizona in 1989. Basically, Happy and Mosler merged together, and we moved our whole facility back to North Carolina. Due to a lot of things that happened in North Carolina, we were only back there for a little over a year. In the end of 90, we left North Carolina, and essentially at that point in time, I was getting out of aviation. Rex was going to Montana with Dragonfly, and that's when it seemed like the whole world was falling down around our shoulders. As circumstances happened, we ended up in Montana also, and then due to a strange set of circumstances, Rex decided to leave Montana and go to California, and he says, here's Dragonfly, you handle it. So all of a sudden, after getting out of it, we had the airplane in our garage and all the paperwork and such, and we were going, oh, well, I guess we're doing Dragonfly now. When I was in Montana, I was setting up the production facility at the Montana Coyote, and it seems like when you get involved in strange circumstances, it seems to follow you around sometimes. So at that point in time, things weren't going too well at Montana Coyote, so we decided, let's look around and maybe find something to do that's kind of outside aviation. At that point in time, my father was working at a research company in California, and he says, well, there's a project that we're working on that you might fit into when they go into production. So I sent my resume down, and the president of the company down, the research company, says, well, come on down, I'd like to talk to you. So I ended up going to the research company in California. Was there for about 6 months, and then the company that they were doing the research for decided to move their project to Nevada. So I went to Nevada and set the facility up there. And about a year later, I was going in to talk to them about scheduling my vacation, and they said, we're moving to Wisconsin. Do you want to move with us? So we're in Wisconsin now.
So for those of you who have followed where we've been, that's the reason. Now you know the story.
So I'm in Wisconsin now, working for a company. We're developing a rotary engine for off-road recreational use. So I'm still in engines and have been for a number of years. And so, and throughout the whole time, we've kept Dragonfly going. We're doing things a lot differently than we did when we were in Arizona. Kind of go into the philosophy that we're working behind now. Essentially, Viking aircraft, if you came to Wisconsin to see it, what you would find is the prototype fuselage is in my garage, the computer and all the paperwork's down in the basement, and the wing and the canard are in storage because my garage is only 21 feet long. And they don't all fit in, and it's only a single car garage. So for the guys who do it in a small place, I can really sympathize building an airplane. Viking aircraft right now, other than Robin and myself, has no employees. We're doing it out of the house, like I said. We're having all the parts made for us. So they're all the parts are still available. You get them through us, and what we do is we don't have anything in inventory in the way of parts. All the paperwork we do. So you order the parts, and then we place the order with the vendor and then have the part drop shipped directly to you. We found that that works out well for the builders. We are selling the prefabricated kit today for the same price we did 10 years ago. And so that's taking into account the inflation and the cost of materials, which has gone up. But we've pretty much cut our overhead down to the bare minimum. By doing it this way, we don't have to put anything in inventory and have it warehoused. So you just anticipate what you're going to be building and just give yourself enough lead time, and we can supply essentially the complete kit. What we handle now are all the unique parts to the airplane. We have all the prefabricated fuselage components, all the pre-cut wing cores, canopies, cowlings, landing gear legs. We have builder support for the airplane. Robin's available during the day for paper information that you might need and such like that. I'm available in the evenings and on weekends for any technical. You can contact us by letter, by fax, and we usually get back to you very promptly. Sometimes it falls through the cracks, but what we have, get my train of thought here going again.
Does this mean we can't come and build our canard or wing in your garage anymore?
That is true. I can't even build a wing in my garage. Yeah. What we've started doing that wasn't done in the past on the construction manual, what you get with the construction manual is all the back issues of the newsletter that we put out while we were in Arizona, which are the first 31 issues. The construction tapes that we generated with our flight school in Arizona, we have those set of 3 construction tapes that come along with the construction manual. We found that we inundate you with information, so basically that helps me on the phone, because if I give you all the information up front, then I don't have to answer as much technical support in the evening, and we can get into the real good questions. One of the things I wanted to bring out is there are a lot of airplanes that are changing hands, or projects that are changing hands. What we do have available for the people that are changing airplanes, or the airplanes that are changing hands, is there's a $65 what we call a builder transfer fee, and what that entitles you to is you can bug me for the life that you have the airplane, on nights and weekends, for any kind of support that you might need. What the things that we just send you out with that, we send you out a new errata sheet to make sure that you have the supplement to the plans, that you have all the updates. And the other thing that we send out with that is a new licensing agreement, which is pretty much a disclaimer that says we have no control over what you do, and we have no control over what parts you put into the airplane or how you put them into the airplane. So if you do something really dumb, you're responsible. And that just, in this day and age with the liability and such that's going on, it doesn't stop anybody who wants to sue, but pretty much it lets you know that you are the builder, you are the ultimate authority for your airplane, and you are the one that is responsible. The other things that we have available, we have, that's kind of a holdover from when we had Happy Engines. We have Rex's book on how to build a reliable VW engine. So for people who are going Volkswagen powered, it goes into basically putting the power head of the engine together. Then we also have the video that goes along with that, showing how the engine goes together. For the people who end up with airplanes that have POSA carburetors on them, we have a videotape that Rex did at one time on basically the care and feeding of your POSA. It goes into how the POSA works, why it works, and educates you to the point to help you get through that learning curve so your frustration level stays down. Because it is such a simple carburetor that most people don't understand it. We have, for the people that already have their plans and such, we have the back issues available. We have the drawings for the Mark III available for people who want to go the Tricycle gear. And for people who are changing the airplane, we've got control system parts, like I said, canopies and cowling. So essentially all the parts, all the unique parts of the airplane are available.
You're going to mention that we're helping people with their electronic ignitions, so we'll set that Happy Engine coming.
Oh, there'll be an upcoming news release in the magazines basically stating for old Happy Engine customers, or if you happen to acquire Happy Engine, some of the unique parts for those engines are available through us also, like the electronics for ignitions. The electronics for the ignition systems are available. The coils, voltage regulators, the alternator windings, the brake pads, the brake O-rings. So as time goes on, if you start wearing some parts out, we can supply the replacement parts for them. And so Viking right now, the airplane, as you know, can be built with several different landing gear configurations. You can build it with the original gear with the gear on the tips. We have the inboard gear and the drawings and such for that. Several people are going to the bow style gear. And we also offer the drawings for the Mark III to go Tricycle gear. I was sitting along the side listening to the builders this morning, And I think one of the things that I picked up was several builders said that keeping it light and building it to the plans, you get a good performing airplane. And I think unlike my father, who was obstinate, set in his ways, or that might be a little bit too harsh, but he was very, but you know, he was extremely vocal on this point. If you don't build it to the plans, don't bother me. You know, I'm not that bad, you know, because I know that people are going to do what they want to do. So, but I kind of try to steer people to the point where if you follow the plans and you build it according to the plans, you know, except for maybe the cockpit area where you can, you know, toss in your individuality, but keep it light, keep it simple, and you'll get the best performance with the least amount of horsepower. Because keep in mind, the original airplane used to weigh 605 pounds empty, and at that point it was cruising 150 miles an hour on a stock 1600, which is basically about 50 horsepower. Granted, it took a little bit longer to get off the ground, but you keep in mind that you had excellent performance on low horsepower. Of course, it didn't have LORAN, GPS, and what else do you have? Moving map. The wet bar and the stewardess, right. Autopilot, yes. So with the more stuff that is going into the airplanes, granted it's going to need more horsepower, but the old adage that Dick Rutan said, if you're deciding to put a part in the airplane, toss it up in the air. If it comes down, don't put it in. So if you keep them light and keep them simple, they work, and they work well. Is there anything else that you have on the parts? Robin's sister's husband has been underwriting commercial insurance for years and been very successful at it. He's now doing aviation insurance. He's a pilot, member of EAA. I know several people have had trouble finding insurance. This is another option. So take a brochure and, you know, pass it around. It's a pilot, and so he might look out for us a little bit better. I don't know, but it gives you an option.
Well, he said he'd try and meet and beat any prices given the opportunity to quote some.
Question?
How about high altitude performance on the stock built Dragonfly? For instance, you've lived in and near some high altitude airports. Do they carry a load out of the higher elevations quite well, or is it something?
Basically relying on, the original prototype, I have trouble flying by myself, and I've never flown it by myself. Basically because the story I heard one time was Bob was sitting around with a couple other guys drinking beer and said, well, let's put the seatback bulkhead here. And the other guy said, no, here, no, here. So where they put the seatback bulkhead in the prototype is further forward than it is in the plans. And so myself being 6 feet, when I sit into the airplane, the rudder pedals hit me right about the ankle. So, you know, Bob was very short from the waist down. He was a big guy, but he was short from the waist down. So I'm in the process of modifying the prototype so I can fit into it and I can fly it. But Rex has done a lot of cross-country work in the airplane, and my mom is not a small person, and she figures that anything she can get in the airplane that he doesn't see doesn't weigh anything. they took out of I think it was Silver City in New Mexico on the way to Oshkosh one year with Joan and Terry Nichols and a couple of other people. And they had an 1835 on it, and it didn't, they cleared the pucker bushes, but not by a whole lot, and finally went out and got enough altitude to get out. But I would imagine they were extremely overgrowth. So if you were flying the airplane within its weight range, normally it doesn't have any problem. It takes a little more runway to get off the ground, but if you can get off the ground, you'll climb out. He's been in and out of Lake Arrowhead in San Bernardino in California. When other airplanes are sitting on the ground waiting for the temperature to go out, Dragonfly gets in and climbs right out. So it's a thing to keep in mind. It's going to take a little bit longer to get off the ground. The guys that are flying in like Colorado, where they're flying that altitude all the time, I can see why they're putting more power and such on the airplane, just to make the airplane more comfortable to fly in. But if you happen to get into a high altitude airport on a cross country, it's going to take a little bit more time to get off the ground. And if you are heavy, then you might want to wait until the evening or take off first thing in the morning.
Are you ever going to offer the Fun Flight Center again, like you did at Hackett?
One of the main reasons why we were able to do the Fun Flight Center is because we had Happy engines. Happy allowed us to do a lot of things that we wouldn't normally have been able to do. Essentially, with the Fun Flight Center that we had, it's like it allowed us to get a lot of people started on their prefab airplanes and get a head start. But if that's all we had, we wouldn't have been able to financially do it. Essentially, Happy was the stability of the operation, and then we were able to dovetail the Viking, the Fun Flight Center, into the facility because it didn't have to support any of the overhead. So we probably not. Like most people right now, I'm working for a living and finding it very hard to get out in the garage after you've worked all day long to work on the airplane. Yeah, because right now I want to redo the interior of the airplane and basically give it a paint job, and I figure it's probably going to take me a year to do that. And I've got a flying airplane to start with.
What does your airplane weigh right now?
I don't know.
You've got the Mark II gears in here now.
Yes.
Did you have to reinforce them? Because we've been doing that around here.
They've been built according to the plans. And that airplane's been dropped in. So essentially the reinforcing on the gear is helping for the side loads. The twisting, yes. Or getting it crossed up, coming a little bit sideways. So it has a little bit more resistance in the sideways action.
Since you haven't offered it, you apparently haven't twisted your legs off yet.
No, these are the very first set that was built up.
We've had so many stories in previous years here that we've been doing that. I'm just wondering.
Yeah, we still have the original ones on it.
You offer the legs as part of your...
Yeah, we offer the landing gear legs, and we have changed the instructions showing the beefed up area in the transition.
Are you doing the beefing up or you leave that up?
That's done when you actually lay up the cloth over the gear leg, and so that would be done at your end. Essentially, we provide the the gear leg ready for the reinforcing material to be added to it.
I've heard some people saying that they wouldn't really need the carbon fiber spar if they are no longer putting gear on the wings. What's your opinion on that?
The carbon fiber in the, well, that is the spar, and it is used in the wing. And the gear was on the canard. So that is part of the structure that gives the stiffness to the airfoil and the structure.
If you're not putting the gear on the canard anymore, if you're using a hoop style gear, let's say.
Well, if you're using the hoop style gear, then I would go to the layup schedule that's in the plans. In the errata sheet, there was a modified layup schedule for the Mark I canard. Basically, you're adding about another 62 feet of carbon fiber into the canard, because you went from about 250 feet of carbon fiber in the airplane to 312. And that layup schedule has a lot more layers, and they graduate all the way out to the tip. Going with the inboard gear, you can go back to the very original layup in the canard, and basically it's the same that was flight tested, flutter tested, and you're not going to be any weaker than. They deny it to this day, but I believe there was an airplane that was built up Tricycle gear that used less carbon fiber, and I believe they had basically airfoil flutter and broke the airfoil. So by leaving the same original layup into the canard, you're going to have the proper stiffness in the structure, and you shouldn't have any basically airfoil flutter. You know, keeping the proper stiffness in the surface. Unless you want to go out and start all over again flight testing.
How do you check the airfoil shape? I took over another project, and I don't know how good or how poor the airfoil is formed.
Do you have the original templates and such? What I would probably do is you're just going to be able to do it for a couple of points. Basically, the outboard section of the center section, the template that went there, and about the middle of the wing and the canard, and then the end. Take the airfoil template and basically make the outside section of that, and just fit it over and see. And keep in mind that you're going to want to allow what you have there is the surface of the foam, and you want to add the thickness of the glass to that template, or actually take that off the material so it would go onto the airfoil. And that would give you a pretty good idea of how the builder did.
Patrick, our earlier conversation about airfoil shapes, do you know what the numbers supposedly are? One, I think, is an Epler. Is it 1212 or something?
I don't know.
You don't have any real record. Nate Rambo originally had given me some names, I think, on it. Because I want to research the airfoil, so I don't want to research the wrong airfoil.
In fact, I haven't even been in touch with Bob for years to talk with him about it, but I'll see if I can find out, because I don't know.
As far as you know, the airfoil was basically just supposedly a constant section going all the way through. Because I ran it in CAD, and I found that the two sections didn't really lay on top of one another perfectly when you scale them.
It's my understanding that it's not a straight GU airfoil. It's been modified a little bit.
One of our newsletters mentioned the numbers, and the GU number, a modified GU number, I think, and they also mentioned one of the possible And I think they'll probably want to way back to Bob Walters when he was putting them up.
Mm-hmm.
One of the possible alternatives was also mentioned.
Using the 82 horsepower engine, what would be the best propeller to use for it? You know, 6 in diameter and 6.
Well, on the 60 horse engine, we ran a 5242. We had a 75 horse on for a little while, and that one, you could do it a couple of ways. Go up 2 inches in diameter, same pitch, or go up 2 inches of pitch for the same diameter. And then on the 82 horse, if I remember correctly, we had a 5444. So we went up 2 inches in diameter and 2 inches in pitch. You got to speak up a little bit. I can't hear you. Yeah, 5248. A lot depends on the prop maker, because. Okay. And that's how big of an engine? Okay. Might not be too out of line. It's right. That's what I was going to say. It's going to be more speed because of, you don't have the diameter, and you're absorbing all the horsepower basically in pitch. So. Yeah. If it takes too much runway, you might want to go up a little bit in diameter and a little less pitch.
Are those numbers really extreme?
Not really. I've heard of that pitch and diameter combination on some of the fast, basically if you're going for speed.
I think I wonder if you could give us just a general overlay on gear problems and solutions, and just what's been happening within the builders community themselves and the Dragon.
Well, we've had several of the builders how to put this? In the very beginning, with the outboard gear canard, before people started getting checked out because there weren't a lot of airplanes out there, a lot of people have had problems with the Mark I. And basically because of the springiness in the canard, which basically prompted the next generation of landing gear, which was the Mark II. We drop tested the Mark II gear legs and made sure that they were strong enough, put them on the prototype, and they worked well. And so we started offering that gear leg. At one time, I think there was some bad gear legs that got out that weren't properly cured, that did cause some problems. And Dragonfly, even though it's a low horsepower airplane, I consider it a high performance airplane because it's so easily gotten behind if you're not anticipating what the airplane's going to do. So people that finish their airplane and don't get some dual time with somebody in a Dragonfly, don't go out and get current again and just hop on the airplane and go flying, are dumb. After spending years working on your airplane, if you don't go out and get some dual with somebody, even if it takes flying cross country to California to fly with somebody that's got time in a similar gear configuration to get checked out, to get a couple of hours, so you can take yours up and you know what to expect. That's cheap insurance. So we've had the people basically what I would consider crashing their airplane and breaking canards with the original Mark I. They are springier. They're not going to tolerate dropping them in. Basically, you have to fly it on like a high-performance sailplane or fly it on like a Pitts. Basically, you fly it down to the ground, dissipate your airspeed, and it's on the ground. You can't go in like you do on a Piper Cub, get within 3 or 4 feet of the ground, stall it, and bounce until you get settled and you're on. It just won't tolerate that. And most of the people that have broken canards typically haven't done it on the first bounce. But not having, you get all flustered and you're bounced back in the air and you're going, I'm nose high, I've just bounced. My tail dragger training says I've got to get the nose back down or I'm going to stall. And what do? You push the nose back down into the ground and you bounce again. And typically, second or third time you break something.
Rich says it takes 3 bounces.
Takes 3 bounces, okay.
I've heard.
Typically what you want to do, if you bounce it, full power, full back stick, fly out of the bounce. If you've got enough runway to re-land the airplane, set up your approach and land. If not, be humble enough and not too proud to push the go button and go around to do it all over again. Because that's right. But most people don't usually break anything on the first bounce. It's usually the second and third because they progressively get worse. So yes.
I was just going to say there was a gentleman at Ottawa that made an interesting observation, I think, on what we're discussing here, that when you shove that stick forward on a dragonfly or a Q-bird, you're taking flaps out too.
Mm-hmm.
So not only are you shoving the nose over, but flat action, the elevator giving you at low altitude like that is being taken out completely. And so you lost a tremendous amount of lift by moving the stick at all.
Well, in Dragonfly, the way it's configured, you can actually take and pull the stick all the way against the aft stop, take off, fly around the pattern using throttle for altitude control, and do your entire flight with the stick against the full aft stop. So by putting full power and full aft stick, you're not going to stall the airplane. You'll just fly out of the bounce. And the thing to keep in mind is even probably more for high-time pilots, Rex was always telling me that on his final approach, he was always saying, if I bounce it, full power, full back stick. He was telling himself what he was going to do when he had the problem, because from going from airplane to airplane to airplane, you've got to keep in mind what airplane you're in. And so if you're flying a Dragonfly and you bounce it, it doesn't help if you're recovering like if you bounced a Cub. You've got to fly a Dragonfly. So to get back to the landing gear saga, so we came out with the Mark II gear, and it helped considerably. Basically now, when you bounce the airplane, the landing gear legs absorb and dissipate a lot of that energy, so instead of the second bounce being bigger than the first, you end up with a decreasing type bounce rather than an increasing bounce that you had with the original Mark I. We had, like I said, some soft gear legs I think got out, and I think at that point the inboard gear kind of got a bad name, but there are several inboard gears still out there, and I think at the same time the airplane started getting heavier. So now we have, for instance, Justin Mace, I think he's, 850 pounds empty. where it started out, the prototype was 605, and it's probably pushing 650 now, I'd imagine.
I'm taking over a project, how do you know if you've got bad legs? A batch of bad legs that you're talking about?
We'll find out. Take a crossman and
First find out on
The bad legs were, I think the inboard gear came out 82, 83, and most of those were identified within the next 6 months. And so the main reason why now they're adding a little bit more reinforcing in the transition area is if you don't land it straight and basically land it sideways, you fail the gear leg in an area that it didn't have a lot of strength or excess strength. And I think the thing to keep in mind is the gear legs that have broken where they were designed to break, which was in the transition. And I think Jack Lovett broke a set of gear legs. If you do have that style gear or the steel gear and you have a problem, the thing to keep in mind, Jack, when he broke his gear leg, it wasn't visible at the time, but he actually developed some damage inside the gearbox, which he picked up when he put the new gear legs back into the box, and then basically failed the box in taxi testing. So you need to go in and make sure that the box is sound. But other than Jack, and we had another gentleman that had that problem in Kentucky. So
Let me say on top of that, your gear leg fell. And it was total side load from pushing the landing light, landing our runway light, and it hit a rut. That's when the box fell.
okay, Jack was saying that his gearbox failed because it was a total side load when he hit the landing light and a rut. Yeah. Okay, hit a landing light and that took him off the runway. Then he slid into a rut, and so it was a total side load that causes damage to the box. But the point I was just trying to get at is, out of all the people that have broken that gear leg, and it was basically where it was designed to fail, Jack and one other gentleman in Kentucky who did a retrofit to an existing canard. He didn't build it up from scratch with the gearbox in. Those are the only two that I've really heard of that have damaged the gearbox. So other than paint and a new gear leg, that was the only damage to the structure. So basically, you know, if you land it sideways, something's going to give. You know, airplanes are kind of made to land straight ahead. As time progressed, they started putting some of the hoop-style gear, attaching it to the fuselage, and that's been done a couple of different ways. And then just recently, we've worked with Philippe Soulis in France, who did a tricycle gear configuration on his Dragonfly, which is a pretty nice conversion, and we have basically are offering his drawings as the Mark III for the Dragonfly, which use a nose gear attached to the motor mount and aluminum landing gear made into that attached to a box that goes between the fuel tank and the seat back bulkhead.
How expensive is the retrofit plan for the Mark III from the two?
Just those drawings are $65.
Where would a guy buy those gear like that?
Good question. The source for gear legs that everybody in the industry has been referring everybody to has had his money now for 6 months, and he doesn't have any gear legs to show for it yet. So we're trying to find a new source for aluminum landing gear legs here in the country.
Anybody can know if regularly flying a Mark II on grass strip? Gearbox legs just standing there?
I know there are people doing it. I don't know a name right offhand, but I know there are people doing it. Typically, I think most of the guys that are doing that stick more wheel out of the wheel pants, or they may not even have wheel pants on them. And they're typically running, I think, bigger tires rather than the 5-inch. They're running 600s, or actually 505s. I think that was Gary Price in the UK, wasn't it? Yeah, he flies out of a grass strip, and I don't believe he has wheel pants on his.
What are sources for engine mount and for the fiberglass rod that goes through the tail?
We have the fiberglass rod for the tail spring. Engine mounts, if the going Volkswagen powered, we're recommending going with Steve Bennett at Great Plains, and basically he can provide a complete engine package. He has the motor mounts, he has the exhaust systems, and the complete engines to go along with it. He also has the spinner port.
Okay, and the plans for the new canard, the flat,
No, the Mark II canard. Those drawings. Yeah. Yes.
What does that sell for?
Just the drawing and the
The instructions. Yeah. So, another gentleman today, a lot of the instructions that we had when we had Happy, we still have those instructions. I had somebody was talking about the motor mount angle that goes behind the firewall. That's in one of the back issues, and we have those drawings separately. A lot of times you can get them just for what it costs us to copy them and postage. So our goal is to get the information out to have good, safe airplanes.
Can you tell us again what you're getting there for the $10?
The $10 basically covers, it's the instructions that go along with the Mark II kit, which shows you the differences for building the Mark II canard. Basically, it's built flat rather than with the anhedral, so you have the blueprint that has all the drawings and the instruction sheets that goes along with it. If you're just building up the flat canard for a tricycle gear configuration, you just wouldn't put the gearbox in it. Or if you were going to possibly want to not know which way you wanted to go, you could put the gearbox in and just not cut the opening in there for it.
We'll paint a new engine mount for the standard configuration of the copy engine and the Dragonfly with the aluminum plate. Will I order them through you, or?
We don't have the engine mounts for the Happy engine. No, all that tooling was left behind in North Carolina when we separated ways. You might be able to, I don't know if Steve has motor mounts for the Happy engine or not, but depending on what his tooling looks like, it could be very well made off the same tooling. Just by doing those, just by putting 4 more holes in his jig.
I believe he has the later style mount.
Right.
I believe he has the later style mount.
Right, but they would probably be set up for his accessory case, and the Happy nappy was different.
I have a question. I have an earlier airplane that has the little angle off the longeron. And I have the Continental in it. Do you think, is the big wide inside angle a better situation? I mean, am I looking at the potential problems developing there of overstressing those? It's only blowing.
How much does the engine weigh?
It's a 75. I don't know the exact weight. I have to pull it off the way.
Yeah, because
Continentals always weigh more than you figure it does because they never list all the weight of the components.
Keeping the engine weight at, I would say, 165, 170 pounds, the angles that come out would be fine. Because we're still flying with that same configuration on the prototype. It has never been changed. Getting heavier than that, I would probably feel more comfortable going in with the big angle behind the firewall, because now you're tied into more structure than just the 4 angles into those longerons.
Do you sell propellers or?
No, we don't. Essentially, we just handle all the unique parts to the airplane that are only used on the Dragonfly.
I'm going to buy a propeller if I can find it for you.
Because if we have to get it from somebody, then we add a little bit, and then it ends up costing more. So we find that works out the best.
Find a local vendor or close by, because with propellers, you generally seem to end up making more than one, and it's best to be able to stick with the same vendor. If you know what the first one did, then he can change hopefully the second one to give you a better.
Or stay with the same vendor. If you're kind of happy with the first prop, you might want to stay with the vendor.
Or look very carefully for your first prop to find what you figure a good vendor.
Right.
Then if you do make a change, at least you're making an improvement, not
Yeah.
making a change.
Worse than the first one.
The better wheel on happy brakes. The old wheel, I had a pair on it, my Dragonfly, I put clean ones on, I'm only using one Quickie. I put clean glass from Magnaflux and they have cracked all through where the bearing goes in.
The last wheels that we were using for the hydraulic brakes were the Azuzas.
These were an old set, and I bought them off a guy that had it, never used them, but they were new.
Okay.
They have a rib type webbing in there, and where the bearing goes in, where the race goes in, take the race out, there's holes. The castings are really poor.
Okay. There was a wheel that we were using before the Azuzas. I think those were a Jim, J-E-M. But we pretty.
Put the brake ring.
Mm-hmm.
You put that on your Zuzas, or does it have to be cut or anything?
They were basically, we were chucking them up in the lathe and facing that surface so it ran true with the bearings before the brake disc went on to the wheel.
You may also have to shim it because there isn't a lot of meat to take out of there. What I mean by that is the surface isn't necessarily true
to the bearing.
And you have to shim that so that the cylinder is parallel to the axle. And
What I want to do is the brake assembler, those wheels are junk. And I get the Zuzu wheels. I seen you had a set here, the guy had it, I don't know if it was selling them. They didn't look like wheels I had.
Okay.
Can you get those wheels with the brake? I can use
They weren't, if I remember correctly, most of the Azuzas were set up for ball bearings, and we were actually going in and machining for the race. So we could put the tapered roller bearings.
Instead of buying a whole new brake assembly for what I'm doing, I just want to get the wheels.
I know the Azusa wheels are available from Azusa, but they're not going to be used right out of the box. We'll take some modification to use them. But it was basically just machining the surface that the brake disc went on to keep it running true with the bearings.
know what I'm saying? Are you guys doing that or somebody doing it for you? That you want to get them right?
I can probably, we're not doing it, but I could, you know, let you know what parts we were using, so you get it done for yourself.
I have to be too, but it's got to be the wheels on putting side pressure on to work up the bolt through the axle. I know it's going to put pressure on the ball bearing, I'll have to put a shim in between the two bearings. Mine didn't have the shim between there, so I think I'm going to go back down to the shim in there, or I was thinking about doing the second bearing. Like a number or something, or someone would take the bearing and get out the 5/8 hole.
That 5/8 hole was the standard ball bearing.
Probably a good idea to repeat that question too.
To tell you the truth, I would have to see the wheel to remember exactly what we did. Because I remember we were, when we were reworking them, we actually, in the center of the wheel, putting a boring the hole so we could put a sleeve to align both halves to each other. We were also facing them so they went up and matched squarely, and then we were able to at that point turn around, bore the face and bore the bearings to make sure everything was running true. So we were doing quite a bit of modification to the wheels before the brakes actually went on. You back? No. No, they were the aluminum ones, and I believe they had 3 spokes.
I just might mention, for any of you that are considering something other than a VW engine, Stan Molesky, who couldn't make it here at the time, has installed a Continental, basically I think it's a C85 in it, and he does have a very nice collar made for it, which is what he was doing. He helped his friend get the trio ready to go to Oshkosh, so he didn't make it here this time, but
Okay.
I got a little plug there, so if somebody is thinking about that, you might talk to Stan, because he probably has somebody that can make the engine mounts and the exhaust system. Probably get the newsletter, I'm sure, as soon as he gets it.
More likely in one of the upcoming ones.
Did you ever come up with that flight testing video years ago? Your dad?
We shot a lot of the video, and we had a very, very rough copy of the text.
Wouldn't that be of value to some of these guys?
But I don't see my wife and kids as it is right now. Yeah. That's one of the things that's still in the works. But it's just a matter of, you know, getting around to it. I figure getting the airplane back in the air is my first priority. But in Wisconsin, dead in the winter, I might be inside working on paperwork.
Can I come up and watch it? Still got the video?
Well, the video is on several tapes. It was not just one video, so it's a matter of putting it together and editing it and such like that. But he basically what we had is just a lot of raw video and a bare skeleton of the format for the text. And that's about as far as that went. Because that was happening right about the time we were everything fell together and we went back to North Carolina.
Do you have any idea or current estimate of how many Dragonflies currently fly or have flown?
They're talking with Spud up at Oshkosh, probably pushing 200 of them that have flown around the world. There's probably over 1,500 sets of plans out, so we actually have a very high completion in comparison to other airplanes. For plans-built airplanes that have flown from the number of plans. They figure about if you have a 10% completion ratio for the per number of plans that get put out, that's a fairly good average. So we're doing pretty good. And we have airplanes flying all over the world, quite a few in Australia, up in Canada, Europe. We've got a couple that are going together, flying soon in Italy. I know he's going to be putting Rotax on the front of his. And then we have Reg Clark up in Canada flying with the 1800cc Subaru. Justin Mace on the Legacy, which is basically too big for the airplane, and he'll even tell you that. We have Dr. Goldman with his Rotary on the front of his. All you need to do is fly, and we can add you to the flying list. But it seems like the VW Power is still the most popular, and I have a feeling it's primarily due to the fact that all the parts to install it on the airplane and get it operational are available. You don't have to engineer anything. So as I know Reg Clark he's got his video out on how he put his engine into the airplane, and basically time's going to tell how popular those engines are going to be, because I know several people are looking to put that engine on theirs when they get it done.
Do you know what performance that he's getting on that engine?
No, it was in the newsletter. Yeah.
You have some fun there. But let me see.
Because you're working on rotary engines now, is there any hope of any of those type engines then going in the Dragonfly in the future? Does that cross your mind?
Well, the engine that I'm working on I think one of the big things on rotary engines is I would like to have a lot of time on the engine prior to going into an airplane, or at least have a lot of history behind it. So, because I'm a coward by nature, I am not a test pilot, but I have test flown things. I've been in the air and lost half of a prop at one time, and when your heart goes up into your throat and the silence is deafening, Yeah, I've broken 4 out of 6 prop bolts one time, and those are the types of things that you don't like to happen. So, being a devout coward myself, let the professionals do the test flying, and when the engine has a lot of time on it, then I'll consider putting it into the airplane. Some of the big things on, like the engine that Dr. Goldman has, which is kind of similar to what we're working with, is we're running exhaust gas temperatures of 17 to 1800 degrees. And what we're working with right now is a water-cooled engine, also charge-cooled, and we have an installation in a snowmobile, and we're burning up all the water in Wisconsin right now. Because we're actually water cooling the exhaust so we don't melt the snowmobile down. So you have a lot of power in a very small package, and the byproduct of that is a lot of heat. And just being able to get rid of the heat, I think is going to be, for that kind of an engine, it would probably be a problem. But to answer your question, if they're out there and successful and they run for a long time, then I'll look at it.
Power to weight wise, it would work out quite well, probably.
Oh yeah. And the main reason why I think there's an upsurgence in that type of an engine is basically a lot of the marine engines and ATV type engines are going to have to get more environmentally safe or clean. And so they're going to have to, they're coming underneath smog regulations in the next couple of years. So they're looking at the phasing out of two-cycle engines here in the States, and so the rotary engine doesn't have the power-to-rate ratio that the two cycles do, but it's better than the four-cycle. So it's right in the middle. So that makes them more attractive. The engine I'm working on right now is a 350cc rotor, and we're developing one basically based on that design that'll be an 800cc rotor. So we'll have an 800cc single and a 1600 twin. The twin should come in between 120 and 150 horsepower, probably 120 first, and then with refinements bring it up to 150. RPM would be about 55 to 6,500, so it'll have to be reduced.